Welcome. I'm Nicole Cooley, and I'm the director of the new college-wide reading series, Writers at Queens, which is sponsoring tonight's reading by Alaya Dawn Johnson. And before we begin, I just want to say a few words about the new reading series and the reading. So Writers at Queens is our new college-wide reading series co-sponsored by the MFA Program in Creative Writing and Literary Translation, the English Department, the Dean's Office, the Dean of Arts and Humanities, the Kupferberg Center, and the School of the Arts. And we're really excited to provide programming for the whole college community. We plan to collaborate with as many departments and programs as possible and offer events that appeal to both undergrads and graduate students. So our next event, which you'll be hearing more about soon, is October 23rd. We're bringing comics artist Ivan Velez to campus for the day to conduct workshops. So that's gonna be wonderful. And I'll just give you one sneak peek of the spring events, which is that we're bringing Haitian-American writer Edwidge Danticott to campus. So we're excited about that. So thank you for all of our co-sponsors that I named above. Thank you to John Rice, at the back of the room, the MFA program assistant. Thank you to everyone who's helping us live stream this reading and allowing people to view it at home. Okay. Thank you also to Q and Willow Books that's outside selling books after the event. So I can't think of a better way to begin this reading series than having Alaya Dawn Johnson read. Alaya is an award-winning writer of speculative fiction for adults and young adults. She was born in DC, attended Columbia, where she majored in East Asian languages and cultures. In 2007, she published her first novel, Racing the Dark. Alaya's debut YA novel, The Summer Prince, was long-listed for the National Book Award for Young People's Literature. Her next book, Love is the Drug, won the prestigious Nebula Award for YA science fiction and fantasy. In the past decade, her award-winning short stories have appeared in many magazines and anthologies, including Best American Science Fiction, Fantasy 2015, The Book of Witches, and most notably, a collaboration with Janelle Monáe in the title story of The Memory Librarian. Trouble the Saints, published in 2020, was the winner of the World Fantasy Award for Best Novel. Her latest novel is The Library of Broken Worlds, which won the BSFA Award for Fiction for Young People and is a finalist for the Ursula K. Guin Award. Alaya makes her home in Mexico, but we are super lucky that this year she's teaching for us in the English department and the MFA program in creative writing. I spent the weekend reading Alaya's novel, The Library of Broken Worlds, which is a book about imagination and storytelling. And I want to end my intro tonight with a quote from that novel. Early in the book, the main character is speaking to another central character, the god, and she speaks of, quote, portal stories, but the subtype where you never go back home and never know why, or how you were hurtled away in the first place, or myths that explain everything and nothing, or legends that leave the reasons a mystery. What about all the mystery that is the beating heart of every story? And I love this, the mystery that is the beating heart of every story. And this is what we're about to listen to when Alaya reads to us in a few minutes. So to conclude, I'll just let you know the format for the reading. After Alaya reads, I will come back up and introduce MFA program alum Megan Alexandra, who will conduct a Q&A with Alaya, and we'll have some time at the end for audience questions. And then after the reading, we will have books for sale and a reception in the atrium outside. So welcome, Alaya.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and everybody for coming today. I'm so excited to read a bit from my novel, The Library of Broken Worlds, which I was just commenting to my colleagues before is a bit of a tricky novel to read from because it's a series of nested stories that begins with a large frame story in which my main character, Freda, who is the daughter of inscrutable, all-powerful AI gods. She was created in the bowels of a place that they call the library, which is a center of knowledge, but it's also like a giant weapon of mass destruction, trying to keep the peace in a system of, in a far future world with different planets and human systems. And basically, she is telling the story of her life in order to placate the war god, the Namarin, so that he does not kill her. So every chapter is sort of a new story of her life, slightly out of order, in which she's telling other stories that she discovered as she kind of narrates a story of how it is that she has ended up pleading for her life in front of this supposedly all-powerful war god. So I'm going to read from right in the middle of it, which you would not think would be comprehensible, but because it's a bit of a story within a story, I think hopefully it should be. And okay, so if any terms are confusing, I'm sorry. And it's only a spoiler if you put things together. So here's hoping it's not that much of one. Okay. Let's imagine a boy. His name is Nanurjuk, and he will bear the family names of my first love eventually in another galaxy, but not just yet. Right now, Nanurjuk is a happy child, nearing adolescence, but blissfully unaware of it. The oldest boy among his cohort, adored by an army of aunts and uncles and respected elders in his clan unit. He was born at near light speed, stretched across the vacuum, slipped into water in the starlit birthing room on the seed ship Bright Journey. His birth father would die 5 years later during an entry accident during first stage colonization. Nanurjuk talks to his simulation sometimes, but less as he gets older. The sameness of that smiling man in the glass room seems as wrong to him now as the hothouse flowers they grow without leaves or roots or smells. After 5 generations of increasing desperation aboard their deteriorating ship, the 10th expedition has had some luck. They have come across a previously undetected habitable planet, orphaned in its solar system by a cosmic disaster eons past, but continuing its heavily elliptical orbit around an orange dwarf. It is an unstable environment in galactic terms, but ideal in human ones. By the time the unstable orbit launches the planet fully out of the habitable zone of its sun, their descendants will have surely developed technological solutions to avert total disaster. And if not, well, as my Nadi would have said, entropy always wins in the end. For now, in Nanurjuk's dreamily remembered youth, they are the first humans in paradise. If that makes some of the more superstitious or mythologically aware look over their shoulders for a fall, they fell because they weren't looking. That's what the Maham said. Nanurjuk's people said nothing because they were dust between the stars. They don't know. Nanurjuk grows up sprinting through valleys carpeted in purple grass. It isn't grass. And playing games with the fast-growing coral flowers. They aren't corals or flowers. The smells of that place will stay with him for the rest of his life. The licorice of the blooms signaling pleasure, the cut grass of their distress, the salt mud of the red rivers, the sulfur rain, the charcoal belching of the river worms launching their bodies from the water to feed at dawn. The new world is so fertile, the colonists hardly have need of their terraforming technology. Nanurjuk's family unit and a few others decide to make a simpler home in territory a few days away from the main colony city. They settle in the gentle elbow of a slow river, rust red from the local algae. They have sufficient land to farm and a mountain at their backs to protect them from windstorms, the only environmental danger. And the greatest gift of all, the moons. 2 moons, 1 rose and 1 blue, that dance with another every night across the shallow bowl of the night sky. The planet's indigenous inhabitants have already discovered this idyllic location. Across the river, countless thousands of the coral creatures dominate the valley, their collective colors so intense that when they bloom and expand their fronds at sunset, it looks as though the valley has dissolved into the sky. They seem happy to share. At least that's how Nanurjuk interprets the curious licorice and wood smoke scent that occasionally drifts across the river. Sometimes xenobiologists from the colonist city come down to take samples and study the coral creatures. The settlers from his community don't like it, but they allow it in exchange for supplies. Every time after the biologists depart, Nanurjuk wades across the Red River and leaves foods and plants with his favorite smells in apology. When Nanurjuk is 13, an emissary flock from the corals take to the skies on the evening of a windstorm and make their languid way to the colony city a day later. They are great sacks with fronds like sails bisecting their backs and a chalky fire lifting their bellies. 3 red-sailed emissaries pause in Nanurjuk's village and begin to release subtly colored, shimmering plumes of smoke that twist on the air and speak to them with sense grossly calibrated to be comprehensible to the settlers, whom the corals consider to be creatures without language. The scents make it clear that the corals have understood far more about the humans than the humans have bothered to learn about them. There is a story in their offering, the charred garbage smell of tierra, of the great plastic islands where the seed ship founders had eked out their living in floating Arctic cities. No one alive has ever seen them, but they are remembered through stories and simulations and a primitive sense inheritance that is dimly humored by the humans and a core grammatical element among the corals. Then come the years in deep space, the story of the generations that lived and died on the malfunctioning seed ship, their landing on the planet, and finally, their settlement on the river, marked by the scent of the indigenous tuber dumpling soup that his uncle first made after self-testing the plant for toxicity. Nanurjuk has the strangest impression that they are recounting to them this story as a sort of shared joke. The emissaries bobble above them for 15 minutes after this performance. In a fit of inspiration, Nanurjuk, his culinary uncle, and another cousin run for the aromatic herbs they use in the bathhouse. They burn them in the little home flame his cousin cups in her tiny hands. The city xenobiologists, belatedly forced to concede the coral's intelligence, attempt to initiate communication. As Nanurjuk might have predicted, it doesn't go well. They can construct devices capable of recording a wider and more subtle array of smell than the human nose is capable of, but they cannot make those machines separate the meaning from the noise. In the meantime, Nanurjuk and his uncle begin to explore the coral city. It is a strange, bewitched place. Paths disappear from one day to the next, then reappear weeks later. Sometimes Nanurjuk walks through one of the perfumed sinkholes that he comes to think of as their communication hubs, and he swears he can hear dozens of voices singing and laughing and asking him questions he can't quite understand. One day, he follows a scampering figure for an hour in the shadowed alleys of that place until he turns a corner and the figure spins around. It's a boy with almost his face, the jaw subtly broader, the first down of a slight beard dusting his upper lip. The not him disappears and Nanurjuk sprints back home. He stays away for a month and won't even explain why to his uncle. It was the eyes. That boy he wasn't pierced him with eyes haunted by catastrophe. Nanurjuk goes back eventually when the sharpness of the memory fades. He is more cautious, more willing to pause and breathe slow lungfuls of words in those sinkholes. One day, he catches the roasted coffee and caramel scent he has come to think of as their name for him. The villagers are coffee and wood smoke, and realizes that they are leading him somewhere. He passes beneath a barrel-vaulted archway, riotous with aquamarine and sunset corals twining themselves around the dead white substructure. They rise and fall like a breath, like the seed ship's ionic sails in a solar storm, like the settler-bred blue algae fanning in the shallows of the Red River. This is the entrance to the heart of the coral, the great bleached white mass that Nanurjuk has only ever been able to climb over or around. Now, a year after he began to visit them, they lead him into the sacred tunnels beneath. They twist and turn, stretch without apparent logic for endless kilometers. Light enters from long skylights tunneled into the surface, and orange shadows jump and fade and twist back around in ways that make Nanurjuk's skin feel bumpy and cold. There are things entombed in the walls. Some of them seem coral, but others seem human. Bits of the dismantled siege ship, its titanium hull twisted into a spiral of millennia dead coral. This is impossible. Nanurjuk knows it is impossible, so he keeps going. It is silent here. There is only his scent to follow. He arrives at last in a great open chamber. There are a few living corals here, twice as large as he is, muted in color and movement. They form a ring around a square in the center. Nanurjuk steps closer and sees. The square is a cube that seems to fold in upon itself every time he moves. The cube is the color of the red ocean, and it is filled with corals. He does not understand what it is. He never does. He only knows that he is in the presence of their holiest mystery, and so he falls to his knees behind the ring of guardian corals and watches. The sea corals are more mobile and darker hued. He recognizes the emissaries as one of their kind. They communicate in bursts of scent that pass easily through the limit of the cube. These creatures were the origin of his name scent, and they are still calling him. He stands. They want him to cross the barrier. He knows this, but doesn't know how. He feels drugged with hunger and thirst and wonder. He steps past the guardians and puts his hand through the wall. The rest of him follows, as though pushed. He falls upside down, inside out, into another world. Emissary corals buoy him. One covers his mouth so he can breathe. He looks around and sees a city 100 times greater than the one he has left behind. He cannot see the end of it. It fills the shallow plateau of this ocean shelf. In front of him is a cube filled with air. The row of guardian corals sit like ancient sentinels, a stark row across a graveyard. It is Nanurjuk's first time through a tesseract. He will cross 2 others in his life, the ones that will take him back to Tierra. He will realize at that moment that this was what he was shown as a boy, but the Awilu make it very clear that they do not want to know this, and don't want anyone else to either. The corals pull him back through after a minute or two in the pulsing heart of their metropolis. He is led home. He stays in bed for a week. A clan elder declares him soul sick, and his uncle feeds him seal broth bought dear from the capital. At the start of the storm season, the Awilu find them. The humans of the 10th expedition understand this first contact much as the humans of Tierra had a few centuries earlier, as an Armageddon, and then as a salvation. But we already know how this story ends, don't we, Namarin? They were right the first time. Months pass, and the Awilu's attempts to penetrate the Coral City are consistently rebuffed. It is closed to all human intrusion. Even Nanurjuk hasn't been able to get past the outermost layer of the labyrinth. They scour the planet once their great golden-skinned transport creatures finish growing. But though they see the whole planet through the translucent lungs of those fantastical beasts, they make no better headway than the other coral cities. Nanurjuk knows they are looking for something. He knows in his heartsick soul what they want to that they want to extract the heart of the coral civilization, that unknowable mystery, like the marrow from a bone. Nanurjuk doesn't like the Awilu, the baobab third creeping around the edges of the Great War, though he does not know that and would not understand if someone tried to explain it to him. He finds them terrifyingly alien, far more so than the corals, their heart, their height, their technology, their formality, their air of benevolent condescension. He knows better than to trust them. But this wouldn't be much of a story without dramatic irony to leaven the tragedy. At the end, when his beautiful home is days away from annihilation, it is these Awilu who will save him and send him right back to that blighted earth that his ancestors paid so dearly to escape. It isn't that the Awilu are so good. They had every intention of colonizing and stealing from the first alien civilization that humans had ever encountered. It's just that the Maham, at that moment in danger of losing the war, are willing to be much, much worse. They arrive with something old and something new, with napalm and suicide roaches, later known as chitterbugs. Napalm for the humans. At a crucial time like this, they are nothing if not meticulous in their military style. And the suicide roaches to dig into the little cracks that it is not in the coral's nature to fill and then shatter them layer by layer. 2 of the elders of Nanurjuk's village die in the first napalm rains. His uncles and aunts gather the children that night and move them into an underground cave that has been equipped with enough supplies for a few weeks. The cave, Nanurjuk recognizes, wears the bones of the corals. Perhaps it was once beneath the Red Sea, like the city in the cube. How long will we be here? Nanurjuk asks his uncle. Can't the corals help us? His uncle has been crying. One of the dead elders was his father. We should be helping them. They never evolved for war, but we have brought it to them. The corals have no choice but to retreat. They collapse their city in advance of the infiltrating suicide roach army. They learn. Early one morning, Nanurjuk watches from the cover of a napalm-resistant shelter as hundreds of emissaries puff up from the chimney of that city like a salmon squirting roe. They are white this time, not red, and they send before them a subtle funereal scent that it takes Nanurjuk a few minutes to place. That great sacred cave, the cube, and its sentinels. He understands that this means death. They're sending their own suicides, he says, a minute before the attack begins. His uncle stares at him and then sets off, running to the village. He saves most of them, but the pollen, as they come to call the coral's weapon, catches 5 villagers, paints their skin the red gold of the coral sea at sunrise, and sends them to the ground in an inevitable sleep. 4 die eventually, hearts gently stopping after days of what seems to be a coma. The 5th, a child Nanurjuk's age, eventually wakes, but she is depressed and confused, seems to float in and out of consciousness. The taint never leaves her skin. The remaining villagers become refugees in the cave. Between the napalm, rogue suicide roaches, and coral pollen, the village is uninhabitable. The remaining elders, including Nanurjuk's uncle, decide that the surviving children should head out with the 3 most physically fit adults and make the trek to the colonist city. Their farewell will burn Nanurjuk for the rest of his improbably long life on Tierra, long after he is an elder himself with great-grandchildren who have never known war. 500 years later, that farewell will come to me in jagged edges and napalm-burned holes and dusted with red gold pollen. The fish moon and the rose moon and that red-orange sun, his home will become the atomized dust of my own. His uncle and 2 distant aunts, the adults are the adults selected to lead them to the city. They leave early one morning before the daily phalanx of pollen attacks, singing in that pre-dawn dark. They leave 15 strong, and Nanurjuk does not look back at his dying village or the cave. He looks back at the coral city. The party is rescued by the ever-reluctant, ever-self-protective Awilu, a day's walk from the colonist city. There are 12 left. The adults have died, and Nanurjuk is leading the children. Those haunted eyes he once found in the running shadows of that alien city are hidden behind a gas mask. Asamhet, the Awilu who has found them, is one of the dissidents who will go on to spend their life protesting the horrors that were committed here. Thanks to their efforts, the children of the lost 10th will be promised land in recompense at the end of the war. Thanks to their efforts, Z will be ostracized until the end of their life in seclusion in a monastery on the natural satellite of Maham, a devout follower of the disciples of the lighted path. Right now, Z brings the children to Awilu War Headquarters amid a merciless Maham bombing campaign that has turned the beautiful organic settler city to a series of holes lined with brimstone. Nanurjuk of the eyes, Nanurjuk whose uncle was killed by Maham raiders while providing distraction that allowed the children to escape, watches and remembers. Asamhet's mad flight arrives just in time. They take the transport beast to the war center orbiting in high atmosphere, a flight that kills the poor creature. The children are 12 of nearly 50 refugees from the entire 10th expedition. The Baobab third of the Awilu have waited too late, as usual. The war center leaves atmospheric orbit and docks on their intergalactic ship, stationed right outside the tesseract of the material god that brought them there. Are we leaving the corals to the other ones? Nanurjuk asks Asamhet as they watch the distant planet. We won't allow the Maham to have control of a new tesseract, and we can't defeat them militarily here. So that leaves, Nanurjuk chokes. He can't speak it. Asamhet opens their eyes so wide it seems they are propped open with sticks. Watch, Z says. Nanurjuk watches a world collapse and then explode and then turn to stardust. With very few exceptions, the Awilu never speak of it again. No one ever listens to the children. Thank you.